I should never have married an old lady like you. Younger women are definitely better. I'm embarrassed to be seen with an old hag like you. I wish I could go back in time and redo my life. These were the words said to me by my ex-husband, John, 10 years ago. My name is Ella. I'm 48 years old. I married John, who is 5 years younger than me, when I was 33. I was a nurse, and I met John at the hospital where I worked. John had just joined the hospital as a new doctor. He had just finished his residency and used to ask me all sorts of things. I found his reliance on me refreshing and couldn't help but want to support him. But I was a nurse, and he was a doctor, and I was 5 years older than him, so the idea of dating didn't cross my mind. Still, he talked to me every day, and I couldn't ignore him. We started talking more and naturally began dating. I was a bit concerned about our age difference, but he didn't seem to mind at all, so eventually, I stopped worrying about it too. And so, after 2 years of dating, we got married. But 5 years into our marriage, he started berating me daily, wishing he had married a younger woman. At the hospital, he would conspicuously enjoy chatting with the younger nurses, but I turned a blind eye since it was our workplace. I didn't want to make a scene and feel miserable. Then, one day, I discovered John was having an affair. The affair partner was a former patient, but I hadn't met her since she was in a different department. She was 10 years younger than me. With an old lady like you, we'll never have kids. She's pregnant with my child. What? John said this with a laugh, as if his affair was the most natural thing in the world. Unable to bear staying with such a man any longer, I agreed to a divorce. Naturally, I told him I would be seeking compensation from him and his affair partner, to which John reacted furiously. Compensation? I stayed married to an old lady like you for 5 years. I should be getting a reward for that. Who would pay for such a thing? He ranted with more fury than I expected. It seemed he never considered that he could be asked for compensation for his affair. I was also contacted by John's father, who seemed to think it's natural for a young man to be drawn to a younger woman, and didn't mention a word about his son's wrongdoing. I was astounded. John insisted he wouldn't pay any such money, so I reluctantly decided to consult a lawyer. After being insulted and cheated on, I wasn't about to back down quietly. The lawyer assured me that demanding compensation was my rightful claim, and I left all the subsequent negotiations and procedures to him. They say getting divorced is harder than getting married, and I certainly found that to be true. Thanks to the lawyer, I was able to get the compensation settled, and I terminated the lease of the apartment where John and I lived, starting my life as a single. I also went back to using my maiden name, Williams. The only silver lining was that John transferred to another hospital. I refused to work in a hospital with a greedy old hag like you. He threw these parting words at me. Perhaps he thought marrying his affair partner right after our divorce would attract negative attention. I was impressed by how well prepared he was for his next job. Still, you can't control what people say. I kept hearing whispers about how my young husband cheated on me and left, and I felt like everyone was looking at me that way. Eventually, driven by paranoia, I became mentally exhausted and ended up quitting the job. I spent some time aimlessly, but as someone who loves working and staying active, I couldn't just sit around doing nothing, so I started looking for a new job. Fortunately, a small maternity clinic 2 stations away from my home was looking for a nurse, and I was hired immediately. The clinic was small, with just a few doctors and nurses, but it was a cozy and comfortable place to work. My boss, Ruby, told me, "The head doctor says you're very attentive and popular with the patients." "Thank you," I replied. But my peaceful days didn't last long. One day, a pregnant woman was referred from another hospital, and when I heard her name, I was shocked. Lucy Harris, the same name as John's affair partner. Thinking it could be a coincidence, I checked. It turned out her husband's name is John Harris, a doctor. It's undoubtedly my ex-husband. The hospital John works at didn't have a maternity ward, and they had recently moved nearby, so she was referred to our clinic. I had gone back to my maiden name after the divorce, and we had never met face to face. It seemed she hadn't recognized me either. But I never imagined I would encounter her here. I didn't know what to do, and felt awkward about telling others that she was my ex-husband's affair partner. Days passed without me mentioning it. Then one day, John came for a checkup with Lucy. "Ella, what are you doing here?" John's eyes widened in surprise when he saw me. Clearly, he hadn't expected to find me here. I certainly didn't want to see him again in such a place. "Ella, what are you doing here?" John's words made his wife, Lucy, realize who I was. "Ella, is she the one who? Did you come to this hospital just to harass us?" Of course not. I had been working at this hospital long before they moved nearby. There was no way I could have known John's new home would be close to this hospital. But John didn't listen to my explanation and accused me as if I was following them everywhere. "You're just following me around to harass me, aren't you?" "Don't be ridiculous. Why would I do something like that?" "Because you're a greedy woman who squeezed money out of me after being dumped for being old." He yelled this in the examination room, and everyone around us learned about our relationship. I felt the piercing stares of others, even though I believed John was the one at fault, but still felt uncomfortable. "I'm scared. Ever since I came here, I've felt like I've been looked at with malice. What if she does something to my baby?" Lucy said dramatically with tears in her eyes, adding insult to injury. "Don't let her near my wife. Who knows what she might do," John said, delivering the final blow. The doctor then asked me to leave the room. It wasn't that he doubted me, but it seemed the only way to calm the situation was to have me step out. I understood that the patient's well-being was the priority, and I didn't want to stay in that room either. But I felt incredibly miserable. And now, everyone knew the details of my divorce that I wanted to keep private. On top of that, Lucy continued to visit the clinic, bad-mouthing me every time she came. Everyone knew I wasn't at fault, but Lucy was a patient, and a pregnant one at that. No one wanted to upset her or get involved in personal matters, so no one said anything. This made my workplace increasingly uncomfortable. Knowing I had to endure this atmosphere for more than half a year until Lucy gave birth was unbearable. Despite it being a good job, I submitted my resignation at the hospital. "It's unfortunate, but it can't be helped," Max, the director of the clinic, said, his face revealing a sense of relief. Despite having done nothing wrong, I couldn't understand why I had to endure such an ordeal. Exhausted by everything, I couldn't bring myself to look for a new job at another hospital and return to my rural hometown. My parents welcomed me without saying much. For a while, I couldn't bring myself to do anything, but feeling guilty for just staying at home, I decided to take a part-time job at a nearby supermarket. Working outside of a hospital for the first time was refreshing and a nice change of pace. I loved my job as a nurse and found it rewarding, but the responsibility of caring for others was immense and there was never a day I could relax. Life away from that was mentally more peaceful. I thought I should have quit nursing sooner. 3 years later, after working hard at the supermarket, I was offered a full-time position. I was overjoyed and gladly accepted the offer. 4 years after that, at the age of 45, I was asked to go on a blind date. "Would you be interested in going on a blind date?" Blind date. There's someone who would be just right for you. The one who brought up this conversation was the manager of the supermarket. At that time, I was 45 years old and had no intention of remarrying. I tried to politely decline, but the manager was persistent. He said the man he wanted to introduce me was 47 years old. He divorced due to his spouse's infidelity, similar to my situation. It had been 20 years since his divorce. Eventually, I couldn't refuse and agreed to meet him. We decided to go for dinner. When I arrived at the restaurant, he was already there. As I entered the room, he stood up abruptly and accidentally hit his forehead on the light. Ouch! He blushed fiery red. I couldn't help but laugh, thinking it was like something out of a comic book. "I'm Samuel. Thank you for coming today." "Nice to meet you." "I'm Ella." Thanks to the initial accident, it didn't take long for us to warm up to each other. As it turned out, Samuel had fallen for me at first sight when he visited our supermarket while on a business trip. He asked around and managed to set up this meeting. Apparently, the store manager was a senior of his from college. I hoped we could get into a serious relationship. I came intending to refuse, but I couldn't bring myself to say those words. Instead, I found myself wanting to meet him again. After 6 months of dating, we decided to get married. My parents really liked him and were genuinely happy for us. Living with him was truly blissful. Considering our ages, we never initially planned on having children. We just wanted to live a peaceful life together, holding hands and enjoying each other's company. But around the time I turned 48, I started feeling unwell. Surprisingly, it wasn't just a minor illness. I was pregnant. I never imagined getting pregnant at this age, and I certainly didn't think my sickness was actually morning sickness. Samuel probably felt the same way. "There will be a baby," I said. He responded as if it was the most natural thing. "That's great news. Who's expecting? Do I know her?" "Yes, you know her very well. She's right in front of you." "What? I'm pregnant?" Samuel looked stunned and was silent for a while. I thought to myself, well, that's a natural reaction. He then looked down at my stomach. "Our baby." As I nodded, his eyes widened even more. He must have been too shocked to think straight. I had felt the same way. "So, does that mean you and I are going to be parents?" "Yes, it seems so." "Really?" "Yes." "Wow." Samuel let out an unusually loud and excited cheer and hugged me. "I can't believe it. It's a miracle, a real miracle. Should I give birth?" I had never considered abortion, but there were concerns due to my age. The uncertainty about the future was undeniable. Even the doctor had asked me, "What are you going to do?" I was well aware of the risks associated with pregnancy at an older age for both mother and child. Not everyone would be supportive. Some might even ask, "Do you realize how old you'll be when the child turns 20? The anxiety about whether we could handle parenting at this age was certainly there. But the thought of ending a life that had just begun was something I could never bring myself to do. Of course, why not? I was so happy when Samuel immediately responded with such conviction, knowing it came from his heart. But then he began to worry about my health. It was easy to imagine the complications that might arise, even for a man like him. After much discussion and careful consideration, we both still felt strongly about having the baby. We spoke with the doctor and started preparing for the birth. Both my parents and in-laws were initially shocked and concerned, but ultimately, they were very happy. We decided to have the baby at a well-equipped major hospital. The doctor was very supportive and understanding, which was reassuring. On one of the checkup days, not only was the obstetrician present, but they also called in an internist, just to be safe. Samuel was supposed to be there, but due to an unavoidable work commitment, I went in alone. I was surprised when I entered the room. There was John, my ex-husband. Honestly, I couldn't believe I was running into him here again. "Seriously? You're pregnant at 48? That's ridiculous." John burst out laughing. Both the obstetrician and the nurse in the room looked bewildered, but John didn't seem to care. "You have no right to say that to me. I'm just concerned about you. An old hag getting pregnant, at your age. That's kind of disgusting. Is that how you treat a patient? To hurl such insults at a pregnant woman already struggling with anxiety is unbelievable. Are you even a doctor? What are you getting all high and mighty about? You know, most of the patients in this hospital are high profile, right? You better leave before you embarrass yourself." "Dr. Harris, I'm leaving. I can't imagine giving birth in a hospital with a doctor like you." "Go ahead, get out of here." "Dr. Harris, this lady is the wife of the son of the CEO of the highly influential Smith Group, who has made substantial donations to our hospital." "What? You may not have known that since you're new to our hospital, though." "No way, but she's I'm a complete stranger to you." "Dr. Harris, what you just said was too much. It's hard to believe such words came from a doctor." I mean, Samuel arrived just as John turned pale. "Sorry, I'm late." Judging from my angry demeanor and John's pale face, Samuel sensed something was wrong. "What happened?" "Dr. Harris here just said that it's disgusting for a 48-year-old to give birth." "What?" Hearing this, Samuel's expression changed instantly. And when I referred to him as Dr. Harris, Samuel must have realized that this man was my ex-husband. I had told him about my previous marriage, and he knew John's name and profession. "So, you're Dr. Harris. You've insulted my wife, haven't you?" Well, insulting a patient? What kind of hospital is this? I can't entrust my precious wife and our baby to such a place." As Samuel finished speaking, the nurse who had left earlier returned with the hospital director. "Mr. Smith, we heard there was some rudeness. I trusted this hospital on my father's recommendation, but to have a doctor like this on staff. It seems I chose the wrong hospital. I'm terribly sorry. This man is no longer our doctor." "What? I've just fired him." "What are you talking about? I didn't know he was like this. He was only hired because an acquaintance asked me to." "We don't need a doctor who speaks so rudely. He will never appear before you again. Please wait. Shut up and leave. Don't ever come near our hospital again." Hearing the director's words, John protested, "No, I won't leave. I don't want to," but the obstetrician dragged him out into the hallway. The director apologized profusely, so we settled back down. But Samuel was still angry. "Did you fire him because my father donates to this hospital? If not, would you have let a doctor like him continue working here?" he asked. The hospital director shook his head in disbelief at Samuel's words. Apparently, John had only been at the hospital for a week. John's father, who was a classmate of the director, had begged for his son's employment at a recent reunion. The director had no idea John would be such a person and expressed deep regret. "Not all doctors at this hospital are like John. In fact, our obstetrician is excellent. I expressed my desire to continue with the birth at the hospital, as long as John was no longer present, and Samuel agreed. My Phil, the CEO of a major corporation with branches nationwide, donates a portion of his profits to medical and welfare facilities. This hospital had received a substantial donation from my Phil because my Mill was treated here for a serious illness in her youth. That's why my Phil recommended this hospital for my delivery." A few days later, John contacted me, begging me to persuade the director to rehire him. He told me, "It might work if you asked." He had often angered patients with his arrogant attitude, hopping from one hospital to another. It's unbelievable how he keeps repeating the same mistakes. His own father had warned him that there would be no future for him if he was fired again. However, part of me couldn't help but think that John's father's leniency contributed to his current behavior. Samuel was with me when John called. Taking the phone from me, Samuel furiously warned John not to contact us again or come near me, threatening to report him to the police for harassment. Frightened, John never called again. Some time later, I stopped by a convenience store and saw John working there. It seemed no hospital would employ him anymore. He was tearfully saying his wife and child had left him, but I felt no sympathy. I decided never to visit that convenience store again. The following year, I safely gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. She is healthy and adorable. No matter what happens, I'm determined to raise her responsibly. Samuel is utterly smitten with her from the moment she was born. I have to make sure that he won't spoil her too much.